Joining me now is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Republican Congressman Mike Turner. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being with us. You met with President Zelensky yesterday. Tell me about your meeting, because, as you know, there is pushback from the House. They're now talking about stripping the Ukraine money out of the defense bill, doing a standalone bill, then trying to get it fixed in the Senate. There's even some Senate opposition, Rand Paul in particular, saying he won't vote for anything, a short gap, a continuing resolution, or anything that includes money for Ukraine.
Right. Well, President Zelensky came to Washington on the heels of his speech in New York before the United Nations. And he came to Washington knowing that he has broad support across the American public and very strong support in the House. The last time that we voted on an issue of Ukraine funding, which has just been in the last several months, over 300 members of the House of Representatives voted in the affirmative. However, we're in this period where we're having procedural difficulty in getting funding bills across the line, which includes, of course, funding the government heading, as we are concerned, perhaps a shutdown coming up September 30th. So it makes it more difficult to confirm or affirm funding for Ukraine during this time period. There are discussions, and I certainly am opposed to anything that would result in not funding or underfunding Ukraine. And I know there are many members like me who know that this, as President Zelensky just said, is about freedom, is about preventing Russian aggression and Russian atrocities. And President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people deserve our support.
And the president also is giving $24 billion in additional aid. And NBC News is reporting that he did promise Zelensky a small number of those long-range missiles, the ATACMS, that he's been pleading for. And the administration was slow-walking it, frankly, concerned that he would perhaps that they would go offensively into Russian territory. Well, not offensively, because they've been invaded, but into Russian territory proper, or some aspects of Crimea. What do you think about providing the ATACMS?
Yeah, unfortunately, the president has been very slow at providing Ukraine with what they need. As a matter of fact, the administration usually turns down and says no to any new weapons capabilities several times before they ultimately deliver them, unfortunately resulting in, I believe, the loss of life and more difficulty for Ukraine to repel Russia. These long-range missiles are needed in order to be able to hit within the Ukraine territory, where Russia has both stockpiles of weapons and also troops from which they're attacking Ukraine. President Zelensky has made an affirmative commitment that he will not use these into Russian territory proper. They've needed them for a long time. I think that the president has been slow, and he, as you said, slow walking them, and he needs to get them into Ukraine and into Ukraine now.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking to the General Assembly today and speaking about the virtues of a possible landmark deal, which would be a three-way deal where the United States would help Saudi Arabia with a civilian nuclear program, nuclear power, and in turn, Saudi Arabia would recognize Israel with diplomatic recognition, which would be, transformative, arguably, because Absolutely. Netanyahu believes, and a number of people in the administration, in the White House, believe it would lead to other Arab countries joining in. It would complete what President Trump started with the Abraham Accords, and could really end decades, more than half a century of Arab-Israeli conflict. The question is, could this ever pass Congress with all of the opposition to the Saudis getting a nuclear power of any sort, civilian or otherwise, obviously, and also with a lot of back and forth about what's happening in Israel. And the Palestinians would get some land, but that has not been defined.
But I think this is very, very exciting. It's, as you said, it would be an unbelievable accomplishment, an expansion of the Abraham Accords that would have the Saudi Arabia recognize Israel. It would end what has been, nearly a half century of blocking recognition of Israel. It would certainly lessen the tension in the area, and it would be just an incredible accomplishment. I think Congress would absolutely support this, depending upon what the deal's terms are. But this would be an incredible accomplishment.
Mike Turner, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Well, good luck on the shutdown, Mr. Chairman, and all of the other things that you're facing. I know you've got a lot of big national security things on your plate, and obviously, I think you're probably one of those hoping that this thing somehow pulls together. Do you think it can be avoided?
Absolutely. I do. I mean, I'm betting on Kevin McCarthy. I think he certainly has the ability to negotiate through this. There certainly is a path, and this would be a meaningless shutdown if it were to occur, and it would absolutely impact people's lives. We need to make sure that we keep the government open and we get this deal done.